everybody. Welcome back to Opria's Open Mic. There we go again. We are here for episode 15, which is crazy. We have one more episode, and then it's going to take a break for the season and come back in January. But today we're going to hit on something I don't really talk a ton about, which is my Marine Corps experience, which I don't know. A lot of people don't even know that I was ever in the military because it's not blasted all over my socials, and I don't really bring it up.
It sneaks in there every once in a while.
It sneaks in there. Yeah, Veterans Day. Absolutely. You know, I usually talk about it. Like, there's little
Happy
things.
Happy Veterans Day, though. Happy Marine Corps birthday.
Oh, yeah, because it is this week.
Yeah.
Veterans Day is and Marine Corps birthday, both. And those are the
November
times.
10th is the birthday, right?
Yes, those are the times that I always talk to some of my friends. They'll say happy birthday from the past, my Marine Corps past. But so that's what we're here today, is just to dive in deep into that. Sean's really good at pulling questions out of information out of me on those topics, because I usually am very vague when I talk about the Marine Corps. And he's like, hey, wait, let's really tell the story.
There are some pretty good stories.
There are some good stories.
Every once in a while, I'll hear a new one. But
we don't really talk a ton about it. But we did have the coolest experience this summer. We had my 20-year reunion of the guys that I went to war with, my first deployment when I went to Iraq. And we had a 20-year reunion that we all got to hang out and talk stories. And Sean learned a ton then, because that was before we were even dating. So that was a really cool experience.
Yeah, 20 years. All right. So give a short rundown, like an abbreviated version of your Marine Corps, life.
Okay. So I joined in 97. I did 9 years. So a lot of you are going to ask why I joined the Marine Corps, which is a huge question.
Nope, I said abbreviated.
I'm going to go ahead and go into that.
I'll tell you what, you say whatever you would like.
Thanks, Dad. But this is a question I get all the time. Why the Marine Corps? So I graduated high school when I was 16. I went to college. Never, ever thought I'm going to join the military. Ever. And then I married my ex-husband, who was a Marine. And of course I saw the movie G.I. Jane, and I'm like, that. So I've never had an idol in my life. Like, I've never had somebody I'm like, I want to be them when I grow up, except for G.I.
Demi Moore, not the actress. The character Demi Moore played.
G.I. Jane. I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to do when I grow up. Oh my gosh, this is really what I want to do. And then my ex-husband, he was in, and I was like, he used to go camping for 2 weeks? Okay, I'm in. And so then I went and signed up. He wasn't sold on the idea, but sometimes you just got to go do what you want to do, whether somebody likes it or not. And I had no regret in it. And I actually planned on staying in and retiring, but I had 2 young kids when I came back from my second deployment. And my ex-husband, I had full custody. And he was going to they told me that I would never have full custody again if I went, because I was getting ready to deploy the third time. They said, if you go back, you will never have full.
Lose your kids. That's hard.
I wouldn't lose them. I just would never have full custody. And I was like, okay, man, and I know moms are going to be like, how'd you ever even think about it? Because I loved my career. I love my kids. Like, I love both. That was the problem. I loved the military and I loved my kids, and I had to pick. And of course I went with my kids, but I mean,
you're not resenting it.
No, I have no resentment. But I would go back in if they said, hey, I know you're really old for the Marine Corps and you're really broke with your knee, but you can come back in. I'd be like, sold, I'm in, baby.
Talked about that a couple of times.
Let's go back to boot camp. Actually, they just put the female and male boot camp together, which it's always been. It doesn't make sense to me either. It's always been separated. And I said, you know what? I wonder if I can go back through boot camp at 45. This is, I think, last year. At 45 years old, can I go back through boot camp and make it? I think it'd be amazing. I'd do it.
Although, I mean, if you're going to have an integrated male and female military anyway, you might as well start it right at boot camp.
I agree. Because everything's so different when I was in to what it is now. We always say, back in the day when I was in, but it literally is a whole different branch. Like, it feels so different. Like, we had to shine boots. There's no shining boots. We had to, I don't know. I mean, I'll think of five things.
There's a bunch of little stuff that you'll hear from newer Marines or Marines that are still in as opposed to ones that are out. Hey, do you remember fill in the blank? They don't have to do it anymore. And then Erin's eyes will light up.
Like,
they get to go home on the weekends? What is that?
Yeah, there's so many things. But that's just the nature of the beast. The world evolves, and so does the military, which really is something that I feel like never evolves, but it does.
Yeah.
But so when I went in 97, it was a lot of questions about boot camp. What was boot camp like? So at that point, it was, again, all women. It was intense, but I was an older Marine in boot camp. I think I was 20. Which is oddly older. And at that point, I was already married. I did not have kids, but I was married because I got married 8 days after I turned 18. Go ahead and tell me I was dumb. I know. I already learned my lesson. Thank you. But I did. I was married 11 years to him, but I was married when I went in. And my nickname in boot camp was Smiley because I smiled all the time. And I got our platoon in so much trouble for smiling. Everybody would be straight face. And I'd be like, gee, I just couldn't, because
it was all funny to you, I guess.
They play so many mind games. And for some reason, I could see right through them and didn't take them personal.
You just don't care.
I don't care.
No,
they'd be like, your husband's at home having sex with all these girls. He's leaving you. You're a loser. Like, the boot camp is there to try to bring you down. And I would just start smiling. I was like, they know nothing about your life, but that's what boot camp is for. Break you down and then build you up to the way they want you. But it didn't. I mean, it works, I guess. It works for most, but I'm very, very headstrong and very secure. Like, I was like, okay, say whatever you want, and I'd smile, and then we'd all get in trouble. We'd get what's called quarter deck, where everybody had to go up there and do a bunch of push-ups, and
you're like,
go ahead and thank her for this. I was like, you're welcome.
You liked push-ups.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, for me, I was like, well, I just get stronger in boot camp. Isn't that what it's supposed to be about? But that's not most people's opinion. But there was some interesting experience, like sand fleas. Sand fleas were an interesting beast. So I went to Parris Island for boot camp. There is a San Diego boot camp for the Marine Corps. There's a San Diego boot camp, and there is a Parris Island boot camp. And no women went to San Diego back then. I think it's different now, but I'm not 100%. Actually, it is different now. But you would have to lay in the sand, and they have these things called sand flies. And they would bite you nonstop. And you were not allowed to scratch, swat, touch. They said they have to eat too. I'm like, you mother. I mean, I was covered. I still have scars on my arms, little white circles where we would lay in our racks at night for bedtime. Oh, our beds at bedtime. And you lay there and you have to lay at attention and sing the Marine Corps hymn every night. And then they say, adjust. And then you can move around, right? And I just scratched. My arms would be all bloody. So I have these little white circles all over my arms that are scars from sand flies.
Oh, God, it sounds miserable.
Sand fleas. Sorry, not flies, sand fleas. But that was part of my boot camp.
And you loved it, apparently.
Right? Dumb. But I did. I loved the challenge. It was a challenge for me. And then we had the Crucible, which a lot of people don't know about the Crucible. It was fairly new when I went in. I don't know how many years it had been there. It's like the big ceremony. At the end, it's a 4-day thing. They basically cut your food way back. They cut your sleep way back, and they put you basically out in the woods and you hump. When I say hump, I'm not talking sexual humping. Humping is walking with all your gear. Like you have your pack on, you have weapons, you have your flak jacket on, you have a helmet on, all the good stuff. You're in your boots and everything. And you go hump for miles and miles and miles. And so you would do miles, and it's 4 days of no sleep, basically very little food. And if you make it to the end of the Crucible, then you become a Marine. That's like your big thing, and then boot camp is basically done. It's a pretty cool experience. I mean, I probably wouldn't have said it was cool back then, looking back at it. I wish I could remember they have all these team-building obstacles that are kind of, I remember them being challenging, but I wish I could remember them to say, are they really challenging? It's got to be
like summer camp on steroids, right? Like, because that's team building, it's confidence building. I mean, it is. It's messed up and it's military. It is very different.
I don't know if I would ever say the military is like summer camp.
But they're trying to build your confidence.
They're building.
They're trying to build your strength. They're trying to build.
They want you guys to be able to depend on each other too, like the loyalty to each other, the camaraderie.
And when somebody tells you to do something, you do it.
That's the joys of having younger people in the Marine Corps, because they don't necessarily want you to think.
Yeah,
because
if
when
you're
they
a thinking
say
Marine, you're
do
no
this, like Marine Corps is kind of known for you just go all in and the thought doesn't come there. You do what you're told. Because if you really think, sometimes you could actually get somebody killed in a life or death situation if you think too much instead of just doing what you're told. If you're like, well, that doesn't sound like a very smart idea. They're shooting and you want me to go over there? That sounds dumb. But when you're young,
that's where they're
you
shooting.
just do what you're told. When you're older, you're like, wait, I don't know if I'd do that. So I think that's why there's a place for younger Marines. Yep.
You gotta send those young women to combat.
There's a lot of women in combat now. There wasn't when I was in, though.
So after you got out of boot camp, what was your job?
So my job in the Marine Corps was, those that actually know the military, it was a 5811, which is an MP, but my actual job...
Military police.
Yeah, MP stands for military police, but it divides into two sections. There's a garrison, which are the ones that you see on base that are like cops. And then there's the field side, which is convoy security, checkpoints, like prisoners of war. And that was my job. So that was what I did. And a lot of questions about how many women were in my unit. So we had 2 women. There was me and another woman. In my platoon, there wasn't any. When I went over there the first time, I was a lance corporal, got promoted to corporal while I was there. And then the second time I went to Iraq, I got promoted to sergeant while I was there. They were 2 totally different experiences of war. Like, I've seen war in 2 totally different ways. Like, my first deployment, let's just dive into that. My first deployment, I went to Iraq in 2003. So that was when the war kicked off in Iraq. I sat in Kuwait for about a month, and it'd be like, you're going, because the war hadn't started. So we still didn't really know. We were all staged there, but nobody knew. Are we going to war? Or are you not? We would get we kept getting, incoming, and we'd run into our bunkers, bunker. And then it's like, are we going in or are we not? And it's like, we're going in tonight. No, we're not. We're going in. And then one night it's like, hey, put on your mop gear, which your mop gear is your chemical suit. Put on your mop gear. We're going in now. And it's just kind of crazy when I think back. I was like, man, that's kind of crazy. You train all these years, right? But do you really know what to expect when shit hits the fan? You don't.
There's not a chance.
There's not a chance. Like, it is something that nobody knows how they're truly going to react until you're put in the situation. So we went in, which is a big line of vehicles and what's called a convoy. We have convoy security, but everyone's in their mop gear, which is our chemical suits over our actual camis. You have your flak jacket, which is like your metal plates. But mind you, the Marine Corps doesn't really the Army's pretty loaded in equipment. They come in with all the fancy equipment. The Navy's got equipment. Everyone's got equipment. The Marine Corps, they're like first in, nothing.
Well, tell them the kind of camouflage you had in the desert.
No, our flak jackets were not desert cami.
They sent you to war
with no desert cami
in forest camouflage.
Well, not
right?
our actual uniform, just our flak jackets. But our flak jackets we didn't have enough plates. So you're inside your flak jacket, which is your armor. So if you get shot, it protects your organs. And they're like, well, we don't have any plates to give you guys. So that means your flak jacket doesn't work. And
you just had a vest. You had a
that's really interesting.
You had a stylish vest.
So the Marine Corps we just improvise. That's we're known for having very little and doing a lot with very little what we have. And so everyone made these, the diamond plates that you see like on back of trucks and stuff, that diamond plate.
Oh, yeah.
That was cut,
on fire trucks.
Yeah, that was cut, and that's what we put in our front of our jackets and the back of our jackets. Our vehicles didn't have doors. A lot of them didn't even have doors. And so it wasn't an armored Humvee. So we sandbagged, so in case we went over an explosive, it wouldn't just come through the vehicle. So we put sandbags in the bottom. But our turret gunner had nothing around him. You're just standing wide open. I was a gunner for a long time. If you don't know what a turret gunner is a person you see standing outside the vehicle with either like a 50 cal, which is the real long 100-pound gun, a Mark 19, which is a belt-fed grenade launcher like this big, goes thump, 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 thump. Cool as shit. 240 Golf. Those are kind of the normal ones. Those are the ones that I shot.
What's a 240 Golf?
240 Golf is smaller than a 50 cal, but it's belt fed, so it can go pretty fast. And Wait, where was I going with this? I don't remember it. But
so you didn't. The Marines
so
go
we
in
went
with
in.
a lot of little.
So we
equipment.
go in with very little, but the Army goes in with fully armored everything. And I'm like, wow, what beautiful equipment you guys have. And then they pulled in with a damn kitchen. I was like, you guys have a kitchen? Like, we haven't had a hot meal at this point in forever. So you go in. We go in on day one, and we dig in. When I say we dig in, that means you dig a hole in the ground. You and whoever you're teamed up with, you guys dig your hole in the ground, and that's where you live. You live in this hole in the ground. And it's like 50 on, 50 off, because you build like a big perimeter, and someone has to always be on watch, right? Because you don't want to get attacked. You're in war. And so we set up a prisoner camp. We dug in. And the worst day, I would say, of my life forever and ever, amen, is this one sandstorm that came in the very beginning of the war. And I was like, is this what Iraq is going to be like the whole time? But it was a fluke. It was the one
Once
and
in
done.
100-year.
Yeah,
kind of
it was
sandstorm,
the worst sandstorm. You couldn't open your mouth. You couldn't open your eyes. Your weapons weren't going to fire. You couldn't go to the bathroom. The sandstorm, you couldn't even see. You could put your hand right in front of your face. You couldn't see anything. And the panic set in. It was the worst day of my life.
Couldn't go to the bathroom. Couldn't eat.
You
couldn't hardly breathe.
No, we put our gas masks on to try to breathe. It was, but then your gas mask is still full of sand because you're covered in sand. It was miserable. So we lived in the fighting hole, and war is war. It's what you think of war, and that's what I did. We went 66 days, no shower. 66.
And you were literally guarding convoys going through the desert.
So I did, at that point, I was doing two different jobs. I would do convoy security, which is, I was a turret gunner. Sometimes I was the driver. But mostly I was a turret gunner. Sometimes I would be the gunner or the.
Well, you took positions all in.
Yeah, we kind of switched around, and we did securities all over, which would be like, say they needed to get supplies up to Baghdad, or we needed to get supplies to XYZ. They need convoy security, so you give that security, and convoys don't stop. So if you go to the bathroom, guys just piss in the bottle. Women, well, you just don't go to the bathroom. And if you need to change your tampon, there's not like you're going to go hide behind a tree. It's not like there's bathrooms. You're going to go like put a heel on the ground, pull your tampon out, and just throw it in there. It's not, there's no glamorous anything. There's no bathrooms. There's no showers. There's no nothing. It is just desert. There's no hiding. It's like, hey guys, I have to do this. You can choose to watch if you want, but this is what's happening.
So one person had asked, how did you handle rude comments in the Marine Corps? Well, everything's rude. Like, it's kind of normal life. Like,
it's vulgar.
You put on night vision goggles to watch your other guy go take a shit in the middle of the night and make fun of him.
I mean, and throw stuff at him.
Yeah,
It's just everything is teenage humor.
So you're gonna get teenage humor about being a woman, but they get teenage humor about being guys, and it's just teenage humor in general.
The answer is you cannot take it personal. Yeah, okay. So one thing is they called us what's called a WM, and they would say, politically correct, it stands for Women Marine. But really, back in the day, they don't say it anymore, I'm sure, because there is more politics in it. It stood for walking mattress. And I was like, because we don't go around saying M&M to boys for male Marines. But, so no, it wasn't politically correct. But I didn't take it personal. I could laugh at everything because none of it was personal to me. Okay, they'd say, you're not strong. Well, that is actually probably a fact. I might not be as strong. Now, okay, so let's just keep on. So we'll finish. So that was my first deployment. I know we're kind of bouncing.
Where we go?
So I know we're kind of bouncing. So my first deployment was that we ended up living in like these 2-man hooches, which are like 2-man tents, but our tents didn't hold up because the sand was so bad, so the zipper would break. And everybody in mob gear was so sick, and then they were pooping off the back of the truck, so we have to hold their hands because convoys don't stop, so there's no stopping to go to the bathroom.
So many stories.
There's so many stories, but I won't dive deep because you guys would be really grossed out about my life for several years.
Well,
so needless to say, I'm not a germaphobe. I've seen and done it all.
The first deployment was 11 months, and there was no base.
No, you're mobile. Yeah. So yeah, it was mobile.
There wasn't somewhere to go back to. You just created a new base.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, and we get the questions about like porta-johns. There wasn't porta-johns. How do you think we had porta-johns? who's going to come clean the porta john? Like, so what we did was they would build these, they'd have these cans and then they put plywood over top and they build a circle, like cut a circle out of it. And then you'd sit on them. That's where you go to the bathroom. This was not in the beginning. So the beginning, we didn't have that. But then we ended up getting that. And someone had to be what's called the shit stirrer, where they light the barrel on fire and you go out there. And I would take my turn. Actually, I was in charge at this point. But I always said I wouldn't tell somebody to go do something I wouldn't do. And so I would go out there and take my turn stirring shit. Glamorous job. I've had all kinds of jobs. So you can't say my job's always been pretty. So that was the first deployment. I came home. So when I left my first deployment, my kids were, Hayden was getting ready to turn 1. Hunter, my older one, was getting ready to turn 3. And then I came back and I was home for about 6 months. And then I left for my second deployment, which they were getting ready to turn 2 and 4. So they were young.
Before we go on to second deployment, which where you're heading that way, I want to talk about one thing, because a couple of the items you guys have asked about, it's pretty cool, is being a woman in the Marine Corps, the differences you may have seen about that. And we're going to talk about your Marine Corps experience. But I thought this was pretty pertinent because it talks about your character, it talks about some of the obstacles you faced. So you joined the Marine Corps in roughly what year? 97, and you deployed to Iraq in 2003. So you had 6 years training as a field MP, but there wasn't war at that point.
Right.
And then, so you had 6 years training with your platoon, 6 years knowing these guys, learning with these guys, and then finally you get to do your job in 2003 and get deployed. But they wouldn't deploy you, correct?
Nope, that's incorrect. That I was fine in 2003. It was 2004.
So it was the second deployment they held you back?
Yes.
Okay. My bad. I do know that I wanted to go over that.
Yeah. So I came back for 6 months and then we left again in 2004. So I was there 03, 04, 05. So the second deployment, we went to an area, if you ever search the Battle of Fallujah, it was a very, very violent, disturbing for a lot of people battle. It was a doozy.
One city of Fallujah, and there was a basically
city of Fallujah is the city.
Yes,
yeah,
there was one city.
Yeah,
Fallujah, and you guys basically surrounded it.
Okay, but here let's dive in. So when it was deployment time on the second deployment, they said, "Wait, you can't go. You're a woman," and I was like, "Buddy, I've done all the same training as the guys all these years, and you're telling me as a woman I can't go." And they're like, "Yes, we got left behind." So I was like, that's not going to work well with me. And I did. So I think, yes, as a woman, things are harder. But the answer is fighting harder sometimes is better. Just prove yourself. That's what I'm a big believer in. Prove yourself. Things aren't going to always be even, and you can't sit around and play, "I'm so sad I didn't get treated fairly." Fight for what you know you believe you're right. And so you have to do this thing called in the Marine Corps called requesting mass. That means you have to go up to the higher one and say, "I disagree with what's happened." And
so basically, requesting mass allows you to go above the direct superior. Right?
Yeah, so you can keep moving up in the chain of command.
Yeah, so if you're a corporal, you would normally complain to who?
You'd probably go to at that point, you'd probably go to your platoon sergeant.
So if the sergeant doesn't tell you what you want to hear, you request mast, and that's the only way to get above the sergeant.
You just keep going up.
Okay.
And so I requested mast pretty far up, and they left us, and we ended up flying over there because I did win. And we ended up
multiple times. I mean, they kept telling you no.
No. That was the first. Yeah, it took a little bit.
Yeah, it took a couple requesting mass to get to the right person to convince them to send you over.
Yes. Isn't that funny that I had to convince somebody to send me to war?
Well, everybody knows you're crazy, so that's not a huge leap.
Okay. So then the second deployment was a really interesting deployment, as night and day as from the first one. So we get there. And then they say, "Well, you can't go on the base that everybody's at because," I don't even remember the reason at this point. They said, "You can't go." And I said, "Well, that's horse shit too. That's not going to fly with me." So I requested mass again. And I was like, "No, it's not going to fly. I've trained. I've done the same as everybody else." Because they're like, "No women allowed." I was like, "I know that I'm in a job that's male dominated, but you guys allowed me in this job at this point. So I'm going to do the same as the job. The same as the males." And I requested mass, and they came and picked us up in a helicopter and flew us to the base that everybody was at. It was actually a really cool experience.
Were your friends bummed to see you?
No, they was
they brought Erin.
Shit. And my name at that point was Black. My name in the military was Black because that was my ex-husband's last name. So nobody even really knew my first name. It was always just Black.
Oh yeah, call everybody by your last name.
Yeah, only last name. So that deployment, we worked the Battle of Fallujah. So we were sitting there, and they said we're going to take over the city. At this point, we had a huge prison camp, and the coolest fireworks show I've ever seen in my life was that night. Actually, let's go back like a little bit. I was on the phone with my mom one night. I remember this. It was that.
So you're in a base. Mm-hmm. You're waiting to invade a city. So you're just outside of the city, right?
Right.
You're doing somewhat of a garrison MP job, right? Because you have the prisoner camp.
No.
Somewhat?
No, it's a field. It's a field
MP still thing?
Yeah, because it's not a jail. It's HESCO cells.
But you're waiting for the big invasion to happen.
There you go.
Okay. And then so you are
you're working a normal, what
9 to 5 job.
as normal as you can be over there. And at this point, we have chow hall on this this base just outside the city.
What was the base called?
Camp Fallujah. And so we're still doing some convoys too. But wait, let me get my chain of thought. What I was going to say. Oh, so one day I was on the phone. You got to call home very rarely. They had these sat phones. This is before cell phones, right? I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have a cell phone in the States, and I surely didn't have one over there. And you had these old school sat phones, these huge ones.
Satellite phones.
Yeah, and then you're on the phone with it, and I was on the phone with my mom, and we get incoming, which happened all the time. And it's mortar rounds coming into the base. And I'm on the phone, and she hears and everyone's yelling, incoming, incoming, incoming. The phone disconnects, and we run into the bunkers. And then it's 2 weeks before I talk to my mom again. About gave her a heart attack because there was no communication. I was like, well, surely you figured out if they didn't come to your door and tell you I died, you're fine. I was fine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's fine. Everything's fine.
But
2 weeks thinking you were dead.
Surely she figured it out pretty quick.
No, there's not a chance.
She's a stress monster. But as I would be if it was my kid, too. So this deployment, so we dropped from helos, which is helicopters, and to everybody in the city of Fallujah, it said, if you stay, we'll basically kill you. That's, get out. All the civilians, get out, get out, get out, basically warning them the invasion was coming. And then you see one night we cut their power, and you can see all the lights of everybody trying to get out of the city. And then you see the jets and the helicopters all the jets and stuff with the tracer rounds and the bombs going off. It was insane. I was like, fuck, what kind of world am I in right now? Where am I? And then the next day, everybody goes in for the invasion. We get a ton of prisoners. And then they are like, we need women. So at this point, women are not allowed to be attached to the infantry. So there's no women in what they would call frontline combat. But there's not a line in the sand. Women can't cross this line. It doesn't work like that. So they're like, hey, my job was actually searching people because I was military police, a field MP. So I knew searching very well. But men couldn't search women in their religion over there. So in the Muslim religion, they couldn't search women. And so they wow, we have to have women with our infantry now to search. And so they pulled me. It was this huge thing in the Marine Corps. It's actually in the history. It will be in the history books. An author came over from New York and wrote about it, interviewed us. But they pulled me as the platoon sergeant and formed an all-female platoon. First female platoon to ever be formed. The first all-female platoon. So when I say they formed a female platoon, it wasn't my unit. They pulled women from all different MOSs, which is different jobs. We had a bunch of admin, people that sat and did a bunch of the paperwork side of the Marine Corps. There's a lot of paperwork side. They're on Camp Fallujah. They pulled from Motor T, which is motor transportation. You name it. They pulled all these jobs in, and they said, you're going now out in the city, you're going to search, you're going to be attached to the infantry, which is a panic mode for a lot of women because they're like, wait, this isn't really what their job. Yeah, this isn't what I do.
You're a Marine first.
You're a Marine first. So then at this point, I was attached to the infantry, saw a lot, did a lot. And they set up checkpoints all around Camp Fallujah because when we cleared the city out, in order to let people in, we had to search every single person that went in. And there was, every checkpoint would have thousands of people every day.
How many checkpoints around the city?
5. And so we'd go from checkpoint to checkpoint. And
you were in charge of all the women at every checkpoint.
Mm-hmm. I learned a lot. I got to work with, I got to load, mortars, and I got to go on the arty line and shoot artillery. Artillery line is the loudest artillery. It's like the big, long guns that you see pulled behind a truck, like behind a big 5-ton or 7-ton truck. And they're huge and so cool. But yeah, it was an experience. So every night when I would go back to Camp Fallujah and I had to go to a big intel brief, it would be like colonels, and I was just a sergeant. Sergeants don't go to those kind of meetings. I had to debrief, what did you see? And they're like, we're expecting this many suicide bombers in this AO, which is area of operation. And they're like, I was like, well, Lord, I hope I don't find those suicide bombers. You find them, you're probably not coming home. And then it was time for us to go home. So I did that for about a year, and it was time for us to go home. And I had to turn the platoon over, which was really hard for me. So I tried to extend my stay. I was like, you know what? I want to extend my stay like I'm on vacation.
Yeah, it's a couple more nights in this great hotel.
I wanted to stay longer because I felt like this platoon, I felt like I was really doing something big, and it was really a cool learning experience. I felt like there was a big purpose for me to be there. I had to leave because I actually got denied. I wasn't allowed to stay. You can only be in a combat zone for so long before you have to get out. So I was forced to leave. Turned it over to another woman who did not want the job. She actually was very much against it. And these women were different than what I was used to. Obviously, I didn't work with a lot of women. I worked with mostly men. They were different. They didn't want to carry their ammo. It was too heavy. So I'd have to check everyone's magazines. I was like, let me check your magazines. They'd put their headphones in the trucks. You can't have your headphones in because you got to look for suicide. You got to be vigilant because we're in war. People get complacent, and that's when bad stuff happens. And so I turned it over to this girl that did not want it. And so I know she probably didn't do her checking.
Why did she end up with it? Just for everybody
She was the highest ranking.
You have to, right? That's how it
Somebody
goes.
has to.
She was the highest ranking
yes,
person
somebody
within the
had
platoon,
to take
and
the
that's
job.
why she had it, yeah.
And I was kind of an asshole. This is how I knew convoy security. So at this point, my job had kind of changed where I wasn't really doing convoy. I wasn't doing convoy security. I was in a convoy, but not in charge of the security. And so I would say, and they would start taking the same route. I was like, if we take the same route every day, we're looking for us to get blown up. No, we are changing the route. And so I was the dick that would be like, no, this is not how it's going to go. We're going to change the route. We can't go the same way at the same time every day. They will hit us. And so we didn't. And when I turned it over, guess what? Not long after I left, they got hit.
I think it was 2 weeks.
I think it was 2 weeks. They got hit, and suicide bomber went in on them. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
It makes you think that if you were still there, would it have still happened?
I don't know. I live with a lot of that. I don't know. No, it wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have happened. I am a strong believer it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
That was a tough one.
Yeah, no kidding.
Making my eyes water.
Do you miss being there?
Miss?
At least being a Marine,
I miss
the Marine Corps.
The camaraderie.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of guys that were happy to see you. A lot of really great conversations when you went to that 20th anniversary.
It was so awesome.
It was a lot of fun. A lot of guys with a lot of stories, and it was pretty cool.
It's not always serious. We did a lot of jokester, a lot of pranks. You got to find time to occupy your time when your life is, if you look on the outside, it looks so miserable, but it's not as miserable when you're going through it because the guys you're with, you just laugh and you joke. And I get, did you miss your kids? That's a question I know people are like, did you miss your kids? Yeah, you miss your kids, okay? But when you're there, I hate to say it's out of sight, out of mind, but your mind is focused. It's work. You're at war. You know your kids are safe. I can separate. Look, my kids are fine. I'm going to do a job. is it hard in the first little bit? Yeah, like a little bit, but then my mind's consumed, and I was able to separate it.
Yeah, once you get into work mode, you do work.
I can very
Focus.
much separate anything if I need to. There were some other good questions that we didn't hit. I know we're over on time.
A few people have talked to you or asked about did war continue to affect you? I don't believe you have PTSD. People had brought that up, specifically PTSD.
Well, I went to counseling.
You did go to counseling. So, like, how long did you go to counseling and why?
I can't even remember the length of time. I went to counseling between my first and second deployment. And why? Because I was kind of crazy. Like, I was kind of crazy. I could not adjust to being a mom again. I had the hardest
when you come
time.
back, it's immediately mom's here and they're jumping all over you, and you have to be a mom all of a sudden.
Your brain just doesn't switch like that.
Yeah.
Even though everyone's like, well, it's your kids. I know it's my kids and I love my kids, but your brain doesn't switch that quick like that. You can't go from this
11 months
and then you go into Target and you're like, oh, let's shop and let's buy holiday. It's just like, it's so overwhelming. And so, yes, I got counseling and I feel like I've done really well with the PTSD. But
you weren't in counseling when we met. And we had met. We met in 2007. Yeah,
I didn't go to counseling after the second one. I felt like I learned a lot from my first counseling that I felt like I was good. I did some things that were really bad, and that's what basically I'm not going to even dive into it. But I did some things that we were like, okay, Erin, you need help. And nothing to my kids, nothing like that. But I don't even want to go into what I did. And I don't remember doing it. It was just an experience that my family's like, okay, you got
maybe you're a little different right now.
You're not mentally here, so let's get you some help. And so I was surrounded by good people, thankfully. But even when we went to the reunion, a lot of the guys were still talked about. A lot of them were saying that they have had.
Oh yeah,
lots.
The war affected them. Yes,
very
absolutely.
much
so. Yeah. You actually hit a lot of the questions that people were asking. Here is one. So let's say that there's people with kids that want to get into the Marine Corps. Do you have any suggestions for them?
I would say if the military is something you want to go into, go in the Marine Corps. It's the most challenging one. It's the most challenging. Go ahead, Army, come at me. But it is literally the most challenging one. You go in with the least. You go in first. And it's not always pretty, but it's challenging. And
did you always tell yourself we're the few, we're the proud, we're the Marine Corps? No,
that's so.
No. You didn't. No.
And I didn't go around singing the Marine Corps hymn either.
Could you still?
No, but every time you hear it, it makes your eyes water.
I think you should try and sing the Marine Corps hymn as we're saying goodbye.
I can't. I don't even think I could do it. I'm not doing it. But you know what?
I think Chesty Puller's in there somewhere.
Yeah, Grand Old Man of the Marine Corps. I was going to say, my second deployment, I earned a medal, which is a huge medal for me to get.
We
didn't even hit on that. So that big thing of me doing the all-female platoon.
First ever, she led the first ever all-female platoon attached to the infantry in a war zone.
And then the first female to ever be attached to the infantry. So there's two big things, and I led that and did it pretty well, and now it's a much bigger thing.
Yeah,
it's not uncommon, and I met with every colonel that came through there, every general that came through. I got what's called a challenge coin, which they come in, they meet you. Challenge coins are really big in the Marine Corps. I don't really know how to explain them, but if you get a challenge coin, it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it's a sign of respect from a superior.
So that all the generals from all over would come in to see how is this working with women. It's now a thing, which is crazy. I was the first, but now it's a thing. And so I earned what's called a Navy Com from that.
A Navy commendation.
Yeah, it was a big medal.
I think so there's two that I've always been impressed. You got the combat action, which is
a combat action. In order to get a combat action ribbon, you have to be fired upon, and return fire. So it's not just because you
even if you went to Iraq, there's a lot of people that didn't get a combat action ribbon.
That is correct. Yeah. So you have to be fired upon and return fire to get a combat action.
And then the Navy commendation was a very specific, like you get a giant good cookie award.
Big cookie. It was a pretty cookie award.
So I think
you know what I'll show here on the end of this. I'm going to show you guys my dress blues, which is so you guys can kind of see what my medals look like, and you can look them up if you want to, or you don't. Maybe you don't care. I'm proud of them.
That's actually really that's really good.
I'm proud of them.
There's a story that you didn't tell, which I think it was hilarious, but it comes with meeting the generals. It comes with like a lot of respect that you had earned, and even being a sergeant.
But I worked my ass off to earn respect. When I say worked my ass off,
earned it?
No, but I want to say something. Hold on to your thought. I had to work so hard as a woman. You have to work so hard to earn the respect of guys because it's not given to you. When I showed up to be a part of the infantry guys, they're like, oh, hell no, you're a woman. The infantry wanted nothing to do with the woman. The thought that a woman was coming to work in their area, they're like, oh, no. And we changed their mind so much about women in the Marine Corps. It was a really cool experience because they didn't like us at all. We were not liked in the Marine Corps. And I had to prove myself. I worked my ass off. I worked double as hard as everyone. I stayed up when everyone else went to bed, like it was time to chill out. I would have meetings. I mean, I worked. Like I was a workaholic over there. And then I made sure my fitness scores stayed at the top, like my PFT, which is your fitness score. I made sure I always maxed it out. I worked my ass off. I was like, look, I'm not equal, but I'm going to do the best. Okay, come after me, women. I just said it. I know I said we're not equal because we are not the same. Physically, we are not the same. And I had to prove myself that I could do what they could do without being the same. And that's what I just worked. I worked so hard. And I'm very proud of that. So go ahead and finish your story.
When you got picked to lead that platoon, literally, she was the highest ranking woman who knew how to do the job. That was what it came down to. And that's it. They had a sergeant. That is an enlisted non-officer, relatively low ranking. We had a
platoon sergeant too, but I was in charge.
Yeah, she didn't know how to do it. Yeah. And that's why you ended up at the end of every day talking to very high level
You go to
officers.
this meeting called a debriefing.
And you were the only enlisted person, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so that's impressive to say the least. And you held your own. You did what you needed to do. You did your job.
I would speak and say whatever.
But also one of the reasons it cracks me up. This is my favorite story. So when these generals or colonels would come in, one general came in and wanted to go visit the checkpoints or go out on a tour of somewhere nearby and chose her to be the turret gunner in the Humvee. Yeah. So the general, right? Colonel? I don't know.
Jeez, I don't remember.
Okay, a high-ranking officer. Yeah. And he handpicked the people in his Humvee. And the person he picked for the turret gunner was Erin. All right. So that's one part of it. Two, the rules of engagement and the rules of war change all the time, as I've learned from Erin.
You get this card called your ROE card, which is your rules of engagement. When can you fire? When can you do X, Y, Z? And you have to keep it on you all the time. It's inside your flak jacket.
And rules changed all the time.
Yes.
And some of them were good. Some of them were dumb. And in this case, Erin thought it was very dumb. So at one point, from high up, they said, you can't be up on the turret with the gun as you go out into the...
Okay, let me dive into this. So they said, I know we're so over in time. I'm sorry. You guys cut me off if you want to. But so a 550 cord, which is like the Marine Corps' duct tape. They use it for everything, 550 cord. So like a long piece of rope, but it's really thin, almost like a shoelace thin. And they said your 50 cal, which is your huge gun, it's a 100-pound gun. It's got the hot barrel. You change it out with gloves. Long barrel. And they said it's a butterfly trigger, so it's like this. And they said, we need you to tie that with a 550 cord and sit down in the vehicle.
It's too dangerous up there.
It's too dangerous. And I was like, wait. So if we get fired upon, there's nobody manning the gun, and you have to stand up at that point instead of... I was like, this makes no sense.
It's too dangerous. Tie it with a piece of shoelace and sit down in the Humvee.
and hold your... I think I have photos of it, of me holding my...
So instead of being at your gun, you're just in the Humvee.
I'm sitting in the Humvee with a 550 cord holding my rope, and I'm like, this has to be the lamest thing I've done.
So the general, I'm just going to pick general.
I think it was. I don't think it was a general. I think it was
apologize.
a colonel, or even it was
Handpicked you, but at this point, you need to sit in the Humvee with your little shoelace, and the whole time she's mumbling, "This is the dumbest thing." And everybody else around here is like, "Shut up! Like, shut up!" I was like,
had my mouth
this
really-
is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. And what are we doing? I should be on the gun. Blah blah blah.
I'm very straightforward. If you guys haven't noticed,
I can only imagine the guy in the front just getting kind of half berated by the sergeant in the back seat about why she's not up on the 50 cal.
oh my gosh! All right, guys. You know what? Let's just take the Marine Corps was a huge part of my life. It has definitely made me who I am. Oh, geez, what did I just choke on? Made me who.
I'm a Marine.
Sorry.
I'm a Marine when she talks about it. Her voice starts getting deep.
No, but the Marine Corps has definitely made me who I am today with structure, discipline. I probably wouldn't have structured before, but never to the level I am now. And the guys I met will forever be embedded in my soul. The best dudes. We laughed our asses off. This one day we should do a thing of some of the tricks, not tricks, but like pranks and jokes. I have so many pictures, and we can flash some pictures in. Would you guys ever want me to do a podcast like that where I just tell some stories and I show pictures of it? There's some really funny stuff. Maybe it's just funny to me because I was there.
It's probably just funny to you. It's war to everybody else.
All right, guys. That is a wrap. Happy Veterans Day. Happy
birthday.
Happy Marine Corps birthday. Yes. And see you next week. Hey, if you guys have any questions, put them in here. Make sure you guys are subscribing so you don't miss out on any of our podcast episodes. Again, sorry, this one's a little long. Bye, everybody.